Picture this: a bustling terminal at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, where the hum of travelers blends with the roar of jet engines. Among the sea of faces stands Ebony Jackson, a confident black woman clutching her pilot's license. Her heart pounds with excitement. She's about to board the very plane she's scheduled to co-pilot. Moments later, a seasoned pilot greets her with scorn, sneering at her credentials and dismissing her future in the cockpit. He sees only her skin color, her gender, everything except her extraordinary skill. What follows is a flight that will test Ebony's mettle, reveal deep-rooted prejudice, and spark a dramatic twist no one expects. Ebony Jackson straightened her shoulders as she walked through the bustling concourse of Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, the largest and busiest airport in the world. She could still recall coming here as a child, clinging to her mother's hand, gazing in awe at the planes taxiing on the runways. The smell of coffee from the nearby cafe mingled with the aroma of disinfectant, and the overhead speakers announced flight departures and arrivals in a steady drone. To everyone else, the airport was a place of transition, a hub to pass through. To Ebony, it felt like home. Today, though, everything was different. The usual confidence she carried in her stance trembled slightly with anticipation. This wasn't just any day. She had an assignment to co-pilot a Boeing 737 from Atlanta to Los Angeles, a significant step in her career. She clutched her carry-on bag and her pilot's ID, feeling its edges press into her palm. Despite her countless hours in the cockpit and extensive training, a new worry gnawed at her. The subtle, or sometimes overt, prejudice she had encountered throughout her journey in aviation might rear its head again. Her footsteps slowed as she approached the door marked crew members only. Her reflection in its glass surface reminded her how far she had come. She was a tall, poised black woman in her early 30s, her hair styled in neat box braids that just grazed the collar of her crisp pilot's uniform. The uniform itself was a symbol she had yearned for, an acknowledgement of her hard work, her resilience, her unwavering faith in her abilities. Yet her mind drifted to the first time she was told a black woman in the cockpit was unusual. That memory had fueled her determination to make it usual, to make it normal, to make it celebrated. Inside the lounge, a few crew members loitered, waiting for their flights. Ebony offered a polite nod and smile, though she felt more eyes on her than usual. Maybe she was imagining it. Or maybe it was another layer to the daily reality she had grown accustomed to. She needed to brush off the tension. Glancing at the time, Ebony realized she had just a few minutes before she was supposed to meet the captain of her flight, Richard Blaine. She'd been briefed that he was a veteran pilot with decades of experience, and that was all she knew so far, no mention of personality or background. Outside the lounge windows, she could see the sleek, silver wings of the Boeing 737 that would soon carry hundreds of passengers. A tingle of excitement coursed through her, interwoven with a faint worry. She took a deep breath, reminding herself, "This is my seat. This is where I belong." Ebony found Captain Richard Blaine standing near the flight operations desk, reviewing paperwork. He was tall, lean, somewhere in his mid-50s, with silver hair peeking from under his cap. He appeared deeply focused, scanning a clipboard with furrowed brows. She approached quietly, not wanting to startle him. "Captain Blaine," she said gently, extending her hand. "I'm First Officer Ebony Jackson. Looking forward to working with you." He lifted his gaze, and for an instant, Ebony saw a fleeting look of surprise on his face, surprise that quickly shifted to a guarded courtesy. He didn't immediately return her handshake. Instead, his eyes flitted to the ID badge dangling from her uniform. He gave a short, polite nod, then reluctantly reached for her hand with a grip that felt uncomfortably limp. "Jackson," he said, as though testing the sound of her name. "You're the new FO they assigned." "Yes, sir," she replied, putting on a professional smile. I've heard a lot about your experience and look forward to learning from you. He offered a tight-lipped smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Well, we've got a full flight and a tight schedule. Let's hope everything goes smoothly, he said. Then, scanning her up and down as though making a quick judgment, he added, You have all your documents, I assume? She nodded, offering her pilot's license and medical certificates. Absolutely, Captain. It was an almost routine request any captain could ask to verify the co-pilot's documentation. But there was something in his tone, in the skeptically raised eyebrow, that made Ebony feel like she was under a microscope. She willed herself to remain calm. She had faced such skepticism before. After all, there weren't many black female pilots in major commercial airlines yet. Although the numbers were growing, she was determined to be counted among those pioneering women. Captain Blaine scanned her ID, then let out a low, dismissive chuckle. Ha! He mumbled. Interesting. Ebony's jaw tightened slightly. Is there a problem, sir? He handed back her documents, looking almost amused. You'll be fine. Let's get on board, he said, abruptly turning on his heel. She felt her cheeks grow hot at his aloofness. But Ebony schooled her features into an expression of calm confidence. This wasn't the first time someone questioned her right to be in the cockpit. It wouldn't be the last. If there was one thing she had learned through the years, it was that proving her capability mattered more than any argument. Together, they made their way to the aircraft, weaving through busy corridors lined with anxious passengers. As they neared Gate 23, Ebony caught a glimpse of an older woman who beamed at her with a look of admiration. The moment lifted Ebony's spirits. Somewhere out there were people rooting for her. People who saw her as a role model. She refocused her thoughts and steeled herself for the flight ahead. As Ebony boarded the plane, memories of her childhood flooded her mind. She remembered standing on the observation deck with her father at Detroit Metropolitan Wayne County Airport, the cold wind whipping against her cheeks as she watched planes take off and land. Her father had served in the Air Force, and his stories of flying had ignited her fascination with aviation from a young age. He had regaled her with tales of complicated flight maneuvers, late-night missions, and navigational challenges. Those stories never failed to light a fire within her. Growing up, Ebony faced her share of skepticism from teachers and peers when she declared she wanted to be a pilot. Some hinted that maybe she should consider being a flight attendant first, or maybe an air traffic controller. Others simply told her she was aiming too high. But her father's unwavering support propelled her forward. He would say, "The sky doesn't care what color you are, Ebony. It only cares if you can fly." She excelled in math and physics, joined the Air Force ROTC in college, and eventually had enough flight hours to become a commercial airline pilot. Her mother, a dedicated nurse, taught her compassion and resilience in equal measure. Whenever Ebony felt discouraged by the hurdles she faced, she recalled her mother's calm grace in the face of adversity. Now, stepping into the Boeing 737's cockpit, Ebony sensed a flutter of joy. The overhead panels bristled with switches, knobs, and lights that she had learned to interpret with second nature. Behind her, Captain Blaine went through his pre-flight checklist, still wearing that same hint of amusement on his face. She inhaled, letting the sense of metal, upholstery, and the faint tang of hydraulic fluid anchor her in the moment. She was ready. Whatever test this day would bring, she intended to pass it with flying colors. As Ebony settled into the right-hand seat, she meticulously began her portion of the checks. Captain Blaine took the captain's seat on the left, adjusting his seat belt and shoulder harness. He issued instructions in clipped tones, never looking directly at her. His manner was distant, as though he was reluctant to even acknowledge her presence. She tried to keep the conversation strictly professional. "Captain, I've reviewed the flight plan," We have 168 passengers on board, plus 5 cabin crew. Flight time is estimated at 4 hours and 30 minutes, with clear weather over most of our route." He nodded, but said nothing in return. He simply tapped at the flight management computer, verifying her statements. After a minute he spoke. "I'll handle the takeoff," he declared, though protocol usually alternated such tasks between the captain and first officer. Ebony kept her voice measured. "Yes, sir. I'll handle the radio communications and monitor instruments." A half smirk tugged at his mouth. "You do that." For several moments, the cockpit was filled only with the hum of electronics and the faint chatter of air traffic control over the headset. Ebony's heart pounded, not with fear, but with a sense of injustice. She had been here before. She knew how quickly a moment of prejudice could escalate into a ruined flight experience. But she also knew how essential it was to remain composed. The safety of the passengers came first, no matter the tension. Before long, they received clearance to push back from the gate. The cabin crew announced the safety protocols. The plane's engines rumbled to life, vibrating through the floor beneath Ebony's feet. There was always something exhilarating about those first moments of motion, the plane coming alive beneath your command. This was what she lived for. As they taxied to the runway, Ebony offered the usual call-outs, keeping her voice crisp and steady. She could feel Captain Blaine's eyes flick toward her every so often, as though scrutinizing her competence. The moment she detected any sign of trouble, she'd be ready with a solution, a contingency, a calm course of action. The tower granted them clearance for takeoff. Captain Blaine advanced the throttles. The engines roared, pressing Ebony into the seat. She carefully called out air speeds, 80 knots. Vaughn, Rotate and Blaine pulled back on the control column. The nose lifted. The plane soared into the Atlanta skies. Below them, the labyrinth of runways and terminals receded, replaced by the vast sprawl of the city. In that brief moment, Ebony felt that surge of freedom she always felt in flight, a reminder of why she endured the challenges to get here. But then Blaine's voice cut through the euphoria. "Flaps up." She complied, but his tone bristled. It was as though each instruction he gave was laced with doubt that she'd be able to follow it correctly. Once they reached their assigned altitude, Ebony engaged the autopilot. They settled into the cruising phase, heading toward the first waypoint. On any other flight, this would be a time for small talk, maybe a discussion about flight experiences, or simply an exchange of professional courtesy. But here, the cockpit remained steeped in tension. Cabin announcements chimed in from the overhead speakers, and Ebony glanced over the passenger manifest on her monitor. She saw families traveling to Los Angeles for vacation, business travelers with pressing schedules, and a few unaccompanied minors venturing to meet relatives. Each passenger's fate was in her and Captain Blaine's hands. While Ebony's focus never wavered from her responsibilities, a part of her recognized the significance of having a black woman in the cockpit. Perhaps among those passengers was a young girl who would see Ebony in uniform and realize her own dreams were attainable. Yet the heavy silence in the cockpit felt like an invisible chain around Ebony's spirit. She busied herself with routine tasks, monitoring instruments, communicating with air traffic control, updating the flight log. Captain Blaine responded minimally, limiting his words to whatever was absolutely necessary for flight operations. When Ebony asked a perfectly valid question, "Captain, should we expect any deviations around that predicted storm front near Texas?" He responded with a sneer. "Is that something the weather briefing told you, or did you figure it out on your own?" She bit her tongue, inhaled, and answered calmly. "The briefing did mention a potential shift in the front's movement. I'd like to confirm if you want me to request an updated route." He shrugged. "I'll handle the requests. You just keep an eye on those instruments," he said dismissively. Ebony reminded herself that no matter how he acted, she would maintain her professionalism. She was flying this plane, fulfilling her responsibilities. His attitude was his own burden to carry, though it weighed on her too. She'd endured countless microaggressions in her path to become a commercial pilot. This was but another hurdle. Soon enough, she told herself, her skills would speak louder than any prejudice in the cockpit. Cruising at 37,000 feet, Ebony was about to confirm their next waypoint when a sudden jolt rocked the aircraft. The autopilot beeped a warning. Captain Blaine's hands shot to the controls, and Ebony's pulse spiked. From the cabin, muffled gasps and screams of alarm filtered through the cockpit door. The seatbelt sign dinged. "What was that?" Ebony asked, scanning the instruments rapidly. Blaine gripped the yoke. "Looks like clear air turbulence," he said, scanning the weather radar. Indeed, the radar image showed a small patch of instability that had flared unexpectedly. Ebony's gut clenched. Clear air turbulence could be notoriously tricky because it often didn't appear on standard radars. Blaine toggled the seatbelt sign and announced, "Ladies and gentlemen, we've encountered a pocket of turbulence. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened." His voice had lost some of its gruff edge. At last, Ebony saw the professional pilot in him emerging, forced to react to the crisis rather than his biases. The plane lurched again, more violently this time. Ebony took over the radio, calmly notifying air traffic control of the severe turbulence. She requested an altitude change to escape the rough air. Clearance was granted to climb to 39,000 feet. Blaine pulled back on the yoke to gain altitude, but the turbulence worsened in a matter of seconds, jostling them like a toy boat on rough seas. Alarms sounded a caution alert about an engine bleed air temperature fluctuation. Ebony rapidly scanned the engine instruments. The right engine's bleed air was overheating, a potential precursor to more serious issues. She tapped a command into the flight management system, hoping to isolate the problem. "Captain, we might need to reduce power on engine 2, Ebony said. Blaine's expression darkened. "I'll handle it," he snapped. But in that moment, Ebony saw the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. The turbulence was intensifying, and the engine issue needed immediate attention. A string of caution lights flickered across the overhead panel, painting the cockpit in ominous reds and ambers. "Auto throttle struggling," Ebony announced, her voice steady, though her heart was pounding. "We need to do this manually." They powered down the troublesome engine slightly. The plane vibrated, and Ebony fought to remain steady in her seat. Another wave of turbulence slammed the aircraft, sending the cockpit into controlled chaos. Blaine's mouth was set in a grim line as he wrestled with the controls. He looked drenched in sweat, the strobe lights outside flickering off the sheen on his forehead. Suddenly, the aircraft lurched to the right wing dropping precariously. Ebony felt her stomach heave. She grabbed the control column, adding left aileron input to level the wings, following standard procedures for turbulence recovery. Blaine's strength was faltering, or perhaps his nerves were. She couldn't be sure, but he was slower to react than expected. "Captain, we have to—" "I said I've got it," Blaine barked. But the moment he tried to correct the roll, his hand slipped on the throttle. The plane jerked again, the cabin rattling so hard that oxygen masks threatened to drop. Ebony realized that, in all his bravado, he might be losing the handle on the aircraft. She couldn't stand by while the safety of everyone on board was in jeopardy. Summoning all her composure, she pressed her left hand firmly on the yoke, using her right to adjust the power. The plane stabilized momentarily. Blaine shot her a furious glance, but before he could scold her, a sharp pain contorted his face. He clutched his chest. His breathing grew ragged. "Captain?" Ebony asked urgently. "Are you all right?" He didn't answer. Instead, he winced, leaning forward as though in agony. The plane wobbled again, but Ebony maintained the controls, her eyes darting between the altimeter, airspeed indicator, and the pained figure of Captain Blaine. As she steadied the aircraft, Ebony reached for the intercom. Medical emergency in the cockpit. "Captain is incapacitated," she announced to the lead flight attendant. "We need assistance right away." Her voice remained steady despite the tumult. The flight attendant's quick response crackled over the intercom. "We have a nurse on board, Miss Jackson. I'm bringing her forward." The irony struck Ebony that Blaine might have teased her just minutes ago, but now he needed her more than ever. She forced that thought aside. There was no room for pettiness in a life-threatening situation. Within moments, the flight attendant arrived with a passenger who introduced herself as a nurse. Her eyes widened at the sight of the captain hunched over, gasping. "Could be a heart attack," the nurse murmured, checking his pulse. Ebony kept one hand on the controls, trying to maintain altitude and heading despite the lingering turbulence. Ebony's voice was calm, measured. "Nurse, do what you can. We need to make an emergency landing." Blaine tried to speak, but only a strained grunt emerged. The nurse worked swiftly, administering oxygen and aspirin from the onboard medical kit. Ebony quickly considered her options. They were en route to Los Angeles, somewhere over eastern Texas or so. She needed an airport that could handle a 737. Checking the electronic flight bag, she identified Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport as a viable emergency landing site. Large runways, major facilities, plenty of emergency support. She called air traffic control. "Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. This is Liberty Air Flight 907, declaring medical emergency. Captain is incapacitated. Request immediate diversion to Dallas-Fort Worth." The crisp voice of the controller responded, "Liberty Air 907, roger. Descend and maintain flight level 240. Turn left, heading 270. We'll vector you for approach into DFW." Ebony repeated back the instructions, adrenaline coursing through her as she initiated the descent. Now it was all on her. She was the acting pilot in command, a role that typically would fall to the most senior pilot, Blaine. But with him incapacitated, Ebony had to step up and prove her training under the most harrowing of circumstances. She toggled the intercom again. "Flight attendants, prepare for an emergency landing in Dallas. Remain seated until further instructions." Her voice betrayed no fear, though inside her nerves were taut as guitar strings. She could handle this. She had thousands of hours in the cockpit. She had simulated countless emergency procedures, but never had she imagined it would come down to her alone, mid-flight, with a pilot who had mocked her just hours ago now, struggling for his life beside her. The nurse gave Ebony a grateful nod. Captain Blaine was still conscious, but clearly in agony. Ebony felt a surge of compassion for the man, despite his treatment of her. She was determined to bring him and all the passengers safely to the ground. The turbulence finally eased as they descended to 24,000 feet. Ebony carefully adjusted thrust, scanning the flight displays for any lingering issues with the engine. The bleed air overheat had stabilized for now, but she remained vigilant. If that problem flared up again, she might have to shut down the engine entirely. She prayed it wouldn't come to that. Air traffic control vectors guided her in. Each call from the controller was answered with the clarity and calm Ebony had rehearsed countless times in her mind. She informed the cabin, "We are making an emergency landing in Dallas due to a medical situation. We ask you to remain calm and follow the instructions of the flight attendants." Under normal conditions, Captain Blaine, as pilot in command, would handle radio communications on approach while Ebony managed the flight controls, or vice versa. But Ebony now juggled both roles effortlessly, adrenaline sharpening her focus. She trimmed the aircraft for a controlled descent, eased the flaps out in stages, and maintained a stable approach path. The Dallas ground light sparkled ahead, a beacon of safety. Her final approach call came from the tower. Liberty Air 907, you are cleared to land runway 17C. Wind 180 at 12 knots. Altimeter 29.92. Ebony glanced at Captain Blaine. His eyes flickered open, glazed with pain, but he seemed marginally stable under the nurse's watch. Taking a steadying breath, Ebony repeated the clearance. Cleared to land runway 17C, Liberty Air 907. She lowered the landing gear, felt the thump as each wheel locked into place, and extended flaps to the necessary position. The runway lights aligned perfectly with her trajectory. Everything was up to Ebony's skill now. She had to land this 737 gently, quickly, and under complete control, ensuring medical aid would be waiting for Blaine the moment they touched down. All her training, all her resilience in the face of bias, crystallized in this singular challenge. Her brow glistened with sweat, but her hands stayed firm on the throttle and yoke. Over the threshold, she began the flare, pulling back gently. The main landing gear kissed the runway with a jolt that reverberated through the fuselage. She deployed the spoilers, reversed thrust, and the plane decelerated. Air roared in a deafening symphony as the engines shifted to reverse, and Ebony guided the 737 down the runway's centerline until they slowed to a manageable speed. Only then did Ebony exhale. Tower, Liberty Air 907, we are safely on the ground. Request immediate medical assistance for the captain. The relief in the controller's voice was audible. Roger, Liberty Air 907. Emergency vehicles are standing by. Taxi via Charlie, hold short of taxiway Golf. We have paramedics en route. Ebony thanked him, carefully directing the plane off the active runway. An ambulance and airport fire trucks raced toward them, lights flashing. She engaged the parking brake at the designated spot, and the engines wound down to idle. The tension drained from her in a flood of relief, replaced by a momentary surge of pride and an undeniable wave of concern for Captain Blaine. Emergency personnel boarded the aircraft swiftly. Passengers remained in their seats, murmuring and craning their necks to see what was happening. The nurse stepped aside as paramedics took over, assessing Captain Blaine and preparing to transport him to a nearby hospital. He was still conscious, but very pale. As they loaded him onto a stretcher, Ebony heard him murmur something. She bent closer. "Good job," he whispered, his breath ragged. It was the first genuine acknowledgement she'd received from him all day. Before Ebony could respond, he was whisked away down the jet bridge, flanked by paramedics. Ebony remained in the cockpit, running through post-flight checklists with trembling hands. Her entire body felt alive with a potent mix of exhaustion, adrenaline, and raw emotion. Once she was done, she stepped into the passenger cabin to address everyone. Flight attendants moved through the aisles, reassuring passengers that all was well. A wave of applause erupted the moment Ebony appeared. Startled, she paused, trying to process it. Eyes brimming with gratitude and relief turned to her. Tears glistened on the cheeks of a few travelers. They cheered, clapped, some reached out for handshakes. Ebony offered a modest smile. She wanted to kneel down and catch her breath from the overwhelming sense of responsibility she had just shouldered, but she remained composed. A teenage girl near the front had tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she said, voice quivering. "I've never been so scared." Ebony crouched beside her seat, took her hand gently. "You're safe now," she said, voice soft. "You're all safe. We did what we had to do." The flight attendants guided the passengers off the plane, where they could either rebook or continue to Los Angeles on a different flight. A representative from the airline rushed toward Ebony, praising her for her composure. Word of her emergency landing and the captain's medical crisis spread quickly. People from ground staff to air traffic controllers were singing Ebony's praises. Yet Ebony found her mind drifting back to Captain Blaine. the smirk he wore when he first saw her ID. She wondered if he would be okay, if he would recover. And she wondered if this experience would change his perspective, if maybe, just maybe, he'd see her now not as a threat to his pride, but as a truly capable pilot. That part only time would tell. Standard procedure required Ebony to file an incident report. She spent the next hour in a small briefing room at Dallas-Fort Worth, recounting the details to the airline's safety officer and an FAA representative. Her voice remained steady as she explained the turbulence, the engine bleed air warning, and the captain's sudden collapse. The FAA rep, a middle-aged woman named Lisa Thompson, took extensive notes. After Ebony finished, Lisa removed her reading glasses and leaned forward. "First Officer Jackson, we want to commend you. Your actions potentially saved many lives today." Ebony nodded, feeling warmth in Lisa's words. "Thank you, ma'am. I just did what I was trained to do." "That's what all heroes say," Lisa replied, a gentle smile crossing her face. "But it takes more than training to keep calm under that kind of pressure, especially with your captain incapacitated." Ebony's composure nearly cracked at the sincerity of the compliment. She forced a smile, swallowing a lump in her throat. She had always been taught to remain humble in the face of triumph, but a part of her was fiercely proud that the day's events had showcased her ability beyond a shadow of a doubt. When she asked about Captain Blaine's condition, the airline's representative, a man named Jack Rollins, spoke up. "They took him to Baylor University Medical Center. Preliminary reports suggest he suffered a minor heart attack. The doctors say it could have been much worse if we hadn't landed so quickly. He's in stable condition now." The news kindled relief within Ebony. At least he had a strong chance of recovery. She silently wished him well, hoping his near-death experience might lead to personal change. She then gave a final statement. "Thank you for letting me know. I hope he recovers swiftly." Lisa gave Ebony a grateful look. "We'll be in touch if we need more details for the investigation. But from what I see, you made the correct calls at every juncture. You've proven yourself as a highly capable pilot." Ebony left the briefing room feeling drained but validated. She trudged to the hotel shuttle waiting area, thankful the airline provided accommodations for disrupted crew. The sun had set by now, painting the Dallas sky in deep purples and oranges. As she collapsed into a seat in the shuttle, she let out a long breath. The ordeal was finally over. Yet a new chapter was beginning, one in which Ebony's skill couldn't be easily dismissed or laughed at by anyone. The next morning, Ebony awoke to the insistent ring of her phone. She blinked at the unfamiliar hotel room surroundings. The events of the previous day rushed back, and she felt an odd blend of accomplishment and residual anxiety. Checking her phone, she saw it was the airline's operations department calling. "Miss Jackson," came the voice on the line. "This is Mark Patterson from Liberty Air. We've arranged for you to continue to Los Angeles on another flight today as a passenger. However, we've also gotten multiple requests from the media to speak with you, if you're comfortable. And there's something else." Ebony sat up, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "What is it?" "Senior management wants to see you at headquarters next week. They'd like to discuss your performance. There's talk of awarding you the airline's Safety Star and possibly recommending you for early upgrade training to captain." The news startled Ebony. She had heard rumors of the Safety Star, an award given to crew members who showed extraordinary skill and courage, but she never imagined she'd be in the running for it so soon in her career. An early upgrade recommendation would be an even greater honor, and something many pilots waited years to receive. She took a moment to process, then answered carefully, "I'm honored. Yes, I'll be available to meet with them next week." After hanging up, Ebony glanced at herself in the mirror. The reflection that stared back was that of a woman who had faced and surmounted one of the most challenging tests a pilot could encounter. She couldn't help but recall the many times she had been dismissed, undermined, or outright disrespected during her climb through the ranks. And now, no one could take away what she had proven in that cockpit. Before leaving Dallas, Ebony decided she needed to check on Captain Blaine. She felt an odd sense of responsibility and compassion for the man. Despite his earlier antagonism, he was still a colleague and she owed it to him, as a human being, to offer her support. The nurse from the flight had texted Ebony the captain's room information at Baylor Medical Center. Walking through the hospital corridors, Ebony couldn't help but feel an unsettling mix of nerves and compassion. She found Richard Blaine's room. The door was slightly ajar. She rapped gently, and a faint voice invited her in. Blaine lay in a hospital bed, hooked up to monitors and the fourth lines. He looked pale and thinner than Ebony remembered, as if the ordeal had taken a great toll in just 24 hours. When he recognized her, a flicker of unease crossed his features. "Jackson," he said, voice raspy, "you surprised me." "I'm sorry if I intrude, Captain," Ebony replied quietly, stepping inside and closing the door behind her. "I just wanted to see how you're doing." He shifted slightly, grimacing with discomfort. "Doctors say I had a small heart attack, but I'll live." She nodded, standing awkwardly by the foot of the bed. "That's good to hear." Silence swelled between them, thick with unspoken tension. After a moment, Blaine cleared his throat, eyeing her almost warily. "The airline told me what happened. How you saved everyone. Saved me." Ebony offered a tentative shrug. "I did what any pilot would do." His gaze dropped to his hands, which fidgeted with the edge of the bedsheet. "Not everyone could have done that," he whispered. "One, owe you an apology. I was," he paused, searching for words. "I was disrespectful from the moment I saw you. I judged you on your appearance, your background, your everything. I never should have." Ebony found her throat tightening. She wasn't sure how to respond. She had harbored resentment for his attitudes, but now, seeing him fragile and remorseful, she realized the power compassion holds. "Captain, I appreciate that," she managed. "I just hope you recover soon." He swallowed hard. "I don't expect you to forgive me overnight, but I need you to know what you did up there. It was extraordinary. You deserve every bit of praise you're getting." Ebony felt her eyes burn with unshed tears. That moment was more than she had hoped for. "Thank you," she said quietly. She gave him a nod, turning to leave, feeling a strange weight lifted from her shoulders. Within days, Ebony found herself at Liberty Air's Los Angeles headquarters, standing beside the CEO, Angela Carter. As cameras flashed, it felt surreal. She was used to the structured environment of the cockpit, the quiet hum of instruments now replaced by the cacophony of reporters vying for a quote. Angela Carter, a poised woman in a sharp suit, praised Ebony in front of the assembled press. First Officer Jackson demonstrated exemplary skill and composure under extreme conditions, Angela announced, presenting Ebony with the Safety Star Medal. She embodies the values of Liberty Air, excellence, integrity, and dedication to passenger safety. Ebony accepted the medal and tried to keep her composure as the cameras snapped away. Microphones were thrust in her face as reporters peppered her with questions. How did it feel to land the plane alone? What advice would you give to aspiring pilots, especially women of color? Have you spoken to Captain Blaine since the incident? She answered diplomatically, focusing on teamwork, her rigorous training, and the importance of supporting diversity in aviation. Despite the swirling cameras and applause, her mind drifted momentarily. She remembered Blaine's sneer, the quiet humiliations she'd faced in flight school and beyond, and she remembered the unstoppable wave of relief when she touched down in Dallas. This was a moment of redemption, not just for her personally, but for everyone who had faced doubt simply for being different. A week later, Ebony was summoned to a private meeting with the airline's senior flight operations manager. She walked into a sleek conference room. Large windows overlooked the runway, where planes took off into the endless sky. Seated at the table were three officials: Mark Patterson from Operations, Captain Teresa Harlow from Standards and Training, and a representative from Human Resources. They greeted Ebony warmly, inviting her to sit. Mark spoke first. "Ebony, we've been reviewing your record, your flight hours, performance evaluations, and, of course, the events of Flight 907. We're beyond impressed with your abilities." Captain Harlow offered a curt nod. "We believe you're ready for the Captain Upgrade program. If you're interested, we'd like to fast-track your training. It's rare, but we think you've proven your readiness." Ebony's heart soared. She dreamed of this moment, becoming a captain, the one in command. She remembered the times she was told she'd never make it, that she should settle for less. And now the airline was proposing an accelerated path to that left seat. She swallowed, trying to maintain composure. "I'm honored. I'd love the opportunity to prove myself further." Mark slid a folder toward her. "Here are the details of the program. You'll need additional simulator hours, line checks, and some more advanced coursework. But if you pass all of that, you'll be upgraded to captain next year." Ebony ran her fingers over the folder, blinking back the emotion that threatened to well up. "Thank you," she whispered. "I won't let you down." As news of Ebony's achievements spread, messages poured in on social media. She received heartfelt congratulations from fellow pilots, from friends and family, and even from strangers who found inspiration in her story. She also received messages from young women of color hoping to break into aviation. Her story had given them a spark of encouragement. But not every message was positive. Some trolls online belittled her success, claiming she only got recognized because of political correctness or because she played the race card. Reading these hateful comments stung, but Ebony refused to let them overshadow the genuine support and pride she felt. She reflected on her father's words, "Don't ever let someone else's ignorance deter you from your calling." Captain Harlow personally reached out, inviting Ebony to speak at a local flight school's career day. Feeling a responsibility to pave the way for others, Ebony accepted. Her talk was an emotional moment. She saw the hungry eyes of aspiring pilots looking up to her. She recounted her journey honestly, detailing the prejudices, the hard work, and the unwavering dream that propelled her forward. In that crowd, Ebony spotted a young black girl, maybe 13 or 14, her hair in braids, eyes ablaze with curiosity. Ebony paused, locked eyes with the girl, and said, "It doesn't matter who laughs at you. If you can dream it, you can do it. No one can take that away unless you let them." Afterward, the girl approached Ebony with tears in her eyes. "I didn't know girls like me could be pilots," she whispered, voice shaking with hope. Ebony's heart constricted as she enveloped her in a brief, comforting hug. This, Ebony realized, was worth any adversity. Months passed. Ebony's training for the captain upgrade was rigorous. Advanced simulator scenarios, emergency drills, and evaluations by senior captains. She poured herself into the process wholeheartedly. She soared through simulator flights involving engine failures, pressurization issues, and other critical procedures. In each session, her composure earned her commendations. One day, Ebony was on her way to a simulator check ride when she unexpectedly bumped into Captain Blaine in the hallway. He had returned to work in a ground position while recovering. She noticed how his posture had changed, less rigid, more contemplative. Their eyes met. "Ebony," he said softly, a far cry from the harsh tone he once used. "I was looking for you. I'd like to talk, if you have a moment." Despite her initial hesitation, Ebony nodded. They found a quiet corner by a window overlooking the runway. The hum of aircraft engines filled the silence between them. He inhaled deeply. "Look, I know I know I am old school, and I said things that were out of line. I want you to know that my time in the hospital and the fact that you were the one who saved my life gave me a lot to think about. I regret every time I belittled your skill or doubted you because of your skin color." Ebony felt a lump in her throat, but managed to keep her tone cordial. "I appreciate that, Captain. I just hope we can move forward on better terms." He nodded, swallowing. "The truth is, I learned some hard lessons. My father was a pilot, and he raised me with certain biases. But I don't want to keep living like that. I owe you a debt I can never fully repay." Ebony, seeing the sincerity in his eyes, offered a small, measured smile. "You don't owe me anything. Just treat people fairly. That's all anyone wants." He seemed relieved, tension draining from his posture. "I heard about your captain upgrade. Congratulations. You've more than earned it." They parted ways, with a handshake, a simple gesture, yet pregnant with meaning. Ebony left that conversation feeling lighter. She wouldn't call them friends, but perhaps they had reached a truce. And in some cosmic sense, the karma had come full circle. The very person who once belittled her was now grateful for her life-saving skill. The final hurdle in Ebony's upgrade training was the dreaded Captain's Simulator evaluation. A 2-hour session that tested everything from normal procedures to the most extreme emergencies. Ebony entered the full-motion simulator, feeling her heart thump with anticipation. The instructor, Captain Harlow, sat behind her, observing. Ebony wore the captain's uniform for the first time, a surreal moment. She strapped in, mentally reviewing checklists, procedures, and what-ifs. The simulator roared to life, mimicking the engine hum and vibrations of a Boeing 737. They simulated a standard takeoff from Denver International Airport. Right away, the instructor threw her a curveball, an engine failure just after Vone, the point of no return. Ebony calmly feathered the inoperative engine, maintained directional control, and climbed out on a single engine. She executed emergency checklists with the practiced ease of someone who had dedicated her life to this craft. Next came a hydraulic failure scenario, then a rapid decompression simulation at cruising altitude, prompting Ebony to don her oxygen mask while executing a rapid descent procedure. She handled each emergency swiftly, calmly. Her voice never trembled. She showed unwavering leadership, calling out instructions to her virtual first officer, coordinating with air traffic control, and ensuring the safety of the passengers. By the end of the session, sweat glistened on her brow and her pulse pounded in her ears. But she'd done it. She had run through every scenario they threw at her, emerging with no major mistakes. When the simulator powered down, Captain Harlow stepped into the mock cockpit. "Well done, Captain Jackson," she said, emphasizing the word captain. Ebony's heart soared at that official recognition. She'd climbed the mountain. She had arrived. A week later, Ebony stood in a conference room at the airline's headquarters with fellow pilots, friends, and family for a small pinning ceremony, a tradition marking her transition to captain. Angela Carter, the CEO, pinned the golden wings on Ebony's uniform. Applause erupted across the room. Ebony's mother dabbed tears from her eyes. "I'm so proud of you, baby," she whispered as she embraced her daughter. Ebony's father, though now stooped with age, still had the same proud gleam in his eyes that she remembered from childhood. "You took flight in more ways than one," he murmured, voice thick with emotion. After the ceremony, Ebony mingled, receiving handshakes and pats on the back. The older captains, many of whom had once viewed her skeptically, now regarded her with genuine respect. She understood that it wasn't about being a woman or being black. It was about demonstrating unwavering competence and grace under pressure. And she'd done just that. Among the well-wishers, she spotted Captain Blaine in the back. He gave her a nod, small but meaningful. No words were needed. Ebony returned the nod, a silent acknowledgement that they had both grown from their shared ordeal. Months later, Ebony strode through the terminal of Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, once again only this time in the captain's uniform. She had traded the stripes of a first officer for the 4 stripes on her shoulders that proclaimed her rank. Passers-by looked at her with admiration, and Ebony recalled the young girl she once was, gazing wide-eyed at the planes from the observation deck. She would pilot Flight 227 to San Francisco today, her first official flight as Captain Ebony Jackson. She felt the stirring of butterflies in her stomach, but also a quiet confidence rooted in countless hours of training and one unforgettable day when she landed a plane under duress. Her first officer, a young woman named Maria Ortega, approached with a warm smile. "Captain, it's an honor to fly with you," Maria said, clearly excited. Ebony smiled back. "I'm excited too. Let's make it a safe and smooth flight." They boarded the Boeing 737, stepping into the cockpit together. Ebony ran her fingers over the captain's seat before settling in, adjusting the seat to her preference. The moment felt reverent, almost sacred. She completed her checklists with practiced efficiency, and Maria followed suit. When the time came to push back from the gate, Ebony's voice came over the intercom. "Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome aboard Liberty Air Flight 227 to San Francisco. I'm Captain Ebony Jackson, and alongside me is First Officer Ortega. We appreciate you flying with us today, and will do our best to ensure you have a comfortable flight." Her voice rang strong, serene, and filled with a sense of purpose. As the plane taxied to the runway, Ebony couldn't help but think back to the day Captain Blaine first saw her ID and scoffed. She recalled every battle she'd fought, every barrier she'd broken, and the triumphant moment she landed. Flight 907 in Dallas. Now, as she pushed the throttles forward for takeoff, Ebony Jackson soared once again into the limitless sky. But this time, no one laughed at her ID. No one scoffed at her uniform or questioned her place in the cockpit. She had earned her wings, her rank, and the respect of colleagues and passengers alike. And as the aircraft rose gracefully above the sprawling city, Ebony smiled with the knowledge that she had not only changed her own life, she had opened doors for countless others to follow. Thank you for joining us on this extraordinary journey of resilience, triumph, and the power of never underestimating someone's potential. Ebony Jackson's story reminds us that courage, skill, and perseverance can transcend prejudice. In the face of adversity, she proved she was more than capable, she was unstoppable. From her humble beginnings to her fateful flight with Captain Blaine, and finally rising to the rank of captain, Ebony shattered barriers and inspired everyone around her. If this story moved you, please show your support by giving this video a like, sharing it with friends or family who might need a spark of inspiration, and subscribing to our channel for more captivating true-to-life dramas. Your engagement helps us reach more people who can benefit from tales of determination and heart. Thank you for watching, and remember, no one can hold you back when you're meant to soar.